Welcome to a Predator walkthrough video. My name is Seb Barfield. I'm a technical engineer for Predator. And today we're going to go through looking at capacity and managing your capacity and looking at ways you can reduce your capacity. Reduce capacity is a really big thing at the moment, obviously, with a lot of data growth in various businesses. Data is not really reducing at all. And you're looking at your backup environment, you're noticing you're storing a lot of information. You're thinking it's growing month on month, week on week, and it's growing by an exponential rate. It could be by a little rate, but it's looking at what storage you've got available and looking at ways of utilizing Predator, utilizing the reports, and finding ways of reducing that, or potentially looking at retention settings. And are you keeping too much data, for instance? You might look at a backup in gigabytes stored report, and you might see that a node that's 100 gig, you might be storing 1.5, 3 terabytes, which is quite a lot of information, especially if this server. So it's looking at ratios, it's looking at your retention settings, and what could you do? What things could you look out for? And some easy kind of steps to work through and just see what you can do in your own environment yourself. So once logged into Predator, we're just going to go into backup and analytics. And then we're going to see our protection report that loads in on first. So what we're going to do is click the 3 lines or protection, the word, and then we're going to scroll down and go to underneath storage, where you'll find your gigabyte stored report. Then this will load the last 7 days of information if you have had it installed for 7 days. And a nice thing about Predator is it will store information up to 7 years. So clicking on the right bar, you can see you've got 7 days, 30 days, 90 days, 1 year, and last 7 years. You've also got a custom status, or it's custom date range you can use. Custom date range is really handy because you might be looking at your growth over a specific month. You might be looking for a certain value. So what you could do here is go, okay, we want to look for the last 3 years, for example. I'm going to go to custom. I'm going to select 3 years ago to this date, and I'm going to get that date range, and I'll be able to see how my data has grown over time. But what we're going to do is we're going to start in 7 days. What we can do is actually, we could try and do 1 year and have a look at our graph here. Again, this information here, you can see how it's collecting that information. We can go back to June the 4th, back here, June the 6th, as it's showing. And we can see 194 terabytes, and our data has been up and down. This is a test environment, and we can see what's going on. Now you can see here, once we've had this drop off and this random amounts of data going up and down, we can see this steady increase here. So it's things like this that you're looking for in your own environment. If you're keeping the same amount of data, you're not really changing much, you might see this steady growth here. And this is where you can look at correlations and looking at, okay, on the 5th of December 2019, I was storing 200 terabytes. And then coming up to April the 20th, I'm storing 266 terabytes. So in about 5 months or 4 months, I've grown by 66 terabytes, which is a huge amount in terms of the amount of data that I'm storing. So 66 terabytes, you're talking over a quarter, 25% growth in 5 months. And then from there, you can kind of go, if this was correlating up and it was still gradually increasing, and you could see, and you could look at making estimates here and looking at what your potential growth rates are, what is going on in the environment. So what we could see here, we've grown 60. If this was carrying on straight into the 6th or the 4th today, we could then see that if it's going to be 66 terabytes over 5 months, in the next 5 months, I might grow by another 66 terabytes. So this is where we can look at bringing in the amount of spare capacity we have on our storage. This could be tape, this could be disk, this could be replication as well. So it's looking at what you've got available. So you might go, is 66 terabytes. Am I can have enough space on my V7000, my V5000, for example? It could be a flash system, or tapes, as I've just said. And looking at this information, you can go, okay, 66 terabytes, have I got enough? If I've got enough, that's great. If you haven't, then it gives you that preemptive measure of going, okay, if my grate's doing that, I want to be able to be pre-prepared, and I don't want to come to a case where I'm having maybe 1 or 2 terabytes free left in my environment, or spare disks, for example, that I'm going to add into a container pool. And I want to make sure that my backups are continuously being successful, because if you've got no disk space, then they're not going to be successful. You need that wiggle room as well, especially when you're doing dedupe and compression as well. So that's one way of looking at it, is looking at correlations over time. And what you can do as well is you can click on the three dots on one of the dates here. So we've got our server node names, we've got the type, we've got the primary. You also will see a copy if you've got tape or replication setup. And then what you see is your growth rates as well. So what we can see here is over a certain amount of time, we can see the primary growth rate of 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, and 1 year. So again, this is really key, because when collecting that information or trying to find that information from a command line, from IBM Operations Center or anything like that, you haven't got this in-depth of information. So from here, we can actually see our growth rates over a period of time, and we can look at what is grown by the most. So for instance, we could click 3 months here, and we can see that the top node has grown by 36.5%. We can also see over 6 months, 173%. We could do this and search on 1 year. Again, one anomaly you will find is if you've had any new backups into the system, then you might find the yearly growth is exponential, because it could be a case that it's a brand new backup and yeah, the growth is going to increase. If you've got falls, incrementals running constantly, that primary growth is going to be slightly out or slightly skewed. But again, this is really good at looking at, say, your month retention, your 3 months growth, for example, and just having a look at what different ones are. Is it growing faster than you think? Are you storing more data than you think you are? Because looking at this, if you've got, say, 20% growth, is your backup environment going to grow by 20%? So you might have a look into that server. You might go, okay, what am I storing? Is my application owner keeping too much information? Is there just redundant information on that server that does need to be backed up? It could be a file space. It could be an accidental plug-in of a USB drive into a server where that's been left overnight, the backups ran, it's backed up that drive, and you've got that redundant file space there. So look at this, you've got like 3 terabytes here, 44 terabytes there. You might look at these and go, okay, I need to have a look into that. What you can also have a look at is click on file space here. You can see individual file spaces here as well. So what you could do is look into these individual file spaces and go on file space percent utilized, and you can have a look at, say, hog factor, for example. So hog factor is the amount of times a file space is kept or seen within the Spectrum Protect environment. You can see backup start date, end date, and you can have a look at when it was last backed up. So another way of looking at whether a drive has been accidentally backed up or shouldn't have been backed up is having a look and say, okay, I know, say, for instance, let's carry on the USB drive theory, and that's been plugged into a server, that's been backed up on the 3rd, for example. The user's gone, oh, I've forgotten where my USB drive is, gone to collect it, and then the backups were in that night and it's not there. So that hasn't backed up for 4 days. So you might look at that and go, okay, is that something there that should be deleted? Should that file space be removed? Is it a case that that file space has accidentally been taken out, for example? So things like this is really key. So your primary growth rates are really key, and looking at what your growth rates over 1 month, 3 months. Also looking at your correlation on these graphs, because the correlation is something really key to look at. It's looking at the trends, and it's just looking at where your data is going to be in. It could be 6 months you're looking at. It could be 1 month. You might start to realize that you're storing a lot of data and you need to have a look into it. And really looking at a forecast of how your data is going to grow will really be key to managing your capacity and your environment in Predatar itself. Another thing you can do as well is click on any of the 3 dots on each node, and then below this will load how a node has grown ever since it's been first reported by Predators. So this is every time it's backed up on a daily basis and the growth rate. So you might find some servers may have a really kind of steady increase. So you have got these increases here, but sometimes you do see it where it's continuously growing and it hasn't reduced. Or you might look in here and find nodes that are storing data that are just not needed anymore. They've been made or they've been decommissioned, and you just forgot about deleting the file spaces. You start that back up and then you go, okay, do we actually need that information? So little things like this is really key in terms of looking what's there and whether that node information is legit or it needs to be deleted itself. So being legit is kind of looking at it. Is it a legit node that is within your environment that needs to be backed up, or is it something that has been decommissioned, like I said, and needs to be removed from the capacity? So one thing you can do with this is export this bottom report by going to the Excel icon here, and you've got a PDF icon as well. So the Excel will allow you to play around with that information, and you'll be able to populate graphs and stuff like that. You can see at the top here. Again, you can just export this image to an Excel image or a PDF file, and it'll allow you just to have a look at that information, and you'll be able to take it away, and you can look at different file spaces. You can look at your node, you compare it to a list you might have of what node should be backed up and what you believe is as a file space in your environment itself. Another thing to look at as well is you could do it, look at from the type here, you've got pre-dedupe. You might also have post-dedupe as well. So post-dedupe is your compression and deduplication together, depending on what version you're on. If you're on, I think it's version 7.1.4. If it's before, like if you look on version 6, version 5, you won't have deduplication. So that's another way to manage your environment, is looking at what version of Spectrum Protect you're on. So if you're on a low version, maybe version 6, version 5, an early version of 7, you might look and go, I might want to look into dedupe and compression, because if I've got a replication setup or I'm looking to do replication, you could incorporate and upgrade to 8.1.7, for instance, and make use of compression and deduplication. So with dedupe compression together, it really knocks down the amount of data that's being stored. So here we can see on the 4th of June, we've had 73 terabytes of post-dedupe data. But if we go to pre-dedupe, but theoretically, we should be storing 237 terabytes. So something like that is really key in your environment of making sure you make use of the latest technologies available with Spectrum Protect through IBM. So obviously, if you are interested in looking at upgrading your infrastructure, so SP servers or anything like that, then by all means do contact Silverstring or your account manager. But yeah, so all these little things you can do are really key at utilizing Predator and the Gigabyte Store report and delving into your information, because this is readily available. If you do have access to Predator, you will find this information in here. You'll be able to look at trends. You'll be able to look at the growth rates per node, and just spending a few days just looking at it, just looking at what information you've got there and what you're actually storing, you could really reduce the amount of data that you're looking at. And part of this as well is reducing capacity will save space on your storage, and it also save cost for licensing. So that's a really key thing as well. So you get a double saver in some ways. So it's something to look at. And I hope this informational video has been really helpful to anyone who has watched this. And thank you for listening. My name is Seb Barfield, technical engineer at Predator. If you do have any questions, please email support@predator.com or contact your account manager. Thank you.